It started with the sound of wind, but not the kind that rattles windows or howls through trees. This was softer, stranger, like someone sighing through hollow wood. It came every night, just past 3, when the house was silent and the world had dimmed to gray. Ellie lived alone in a cottage now, tucked beneath a hill in a forgotten village where streetlights flickered and time moved slower. She'd inherited the place from an aunt she barely remembered, a quiet woman who'd sent birthday cards with no return address and who, as far as Ellie knew, had never left her home in decades. The first week had been peaceful. The rooms smelled of cedar and old books, and at night, the silence wrapped around her like a heavy quilt. But by the 8th night, Ellie noticed it, the sighing wind. She'd sit up in bed, sheets rustling, and listen. The sound wasn't coming from outside, but from within the house. It was faint, almost apologetic, as though something hidden behind the walls was breathing carefully, trying not to be noticed. She told herself it was the pipes. Or the wind slipping through ancient floorboards. Old houses made noises. But still, every night at 3, it returned, steady, slow, in and out like lungs exhaling. On the 11th night, Ellie couldn't take it anymore. She lit a candle and walked through the hall, careful not to wake the house too much. The flame shivered with each step, casting long shadows along the wallpaper, flowers with faces if you looked too long. She followed the sound downstairs, into the parlor, past the cold hearth. The air thickened as she moved, not with dust but with something more, like tension, stretched and waiting. Then she heard it. Not a sigh this time, but a voice. It was faint. A whisper beneath the wind. She couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was pleading. Ellie stood frozen in the middle of the room, candle trembling in her hand. The air around her shifted. Then came a second whisper. Closer. It said her name. Ellie didn't move. The candlelight flickered violently, casting warping shadows on the walls as if the house itself were exhaling. She whispered her own name aloud, like saying it might return ownership of the moment back to her. But the voice didn't come again. Instead, the air settled, quiet and watchful. She waited in the dark, her breath shallow, straining to hear anything else. Just the tick of the old clock in the hall. No wind. No whisper. She finally backed out of the parlor, never turning her back on it, and returned to her bedroom. That night, she barely slept. And when she did, her dreams were filled with narrow halls and doorways that led nowhere. She dreamt of her aunt too, but the woman's face was blurred, her mouth moving without sound, as if trying to warn her. In the morning, Ellie searched for logical answers. She checked the vents, tapped on the walls, even opened the narrow attic hatch above the stairwell. Dust spilled down onto her hair and shoulders, but the space above was empty, just old boxes and a broken rocking chair. Still, the unease clung to her, like cold air in her lungs. At exactly 3:01 a.m. that night, the sighing returned. But this time it came with soft footsteps. Just one or two, like someone adjusting their weight on the floorboards downstairs. Ellie sat upright, heart pounding, staring into the dark. She grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight. Her breath was shaky as she crept to the top of the stairs. "Hello?" she called. "Is someone there?" No answer. But the moment the word left her lips, the light on her phone died. The screen went black, refusing to turn back on. Her breath caught in her throat. Then the sigh came again, right at the base of the stairs. Ellie backed up, gripping the banister, every instinct telling her not to go down. But something in her bones, something ancestral and strange, pulled her forward anyway. She descended slowly, each step groaning beneath her. The living room was cloaked in stillness, but the feeling in the air was alive. It prickled against her arms and neck. Then she saw it. A small crack had appeared in the wall beneath the stairs. One that hadn't been there before. Narrow and dark, like the house had exhaled too deeply and something had split open. From within that crack, a faint light pulsed, dim and golden, like candlelight trapped inside. And over that soft glow, the whisper returned. This time it didn't say her name. It said, "Come see." Ellie stood frozen, her bare feet rooted to the cool floorboards. The crack in the wall pulsed softly, golden light leaking from within like breath through parted lips. "Come see," the voice had said, not loud, not threatening, but deeply wrong in the way a childhood nightmare can be wrong, quiet, persistent, and real in all the ways that mattered when the world was dark. She stepped closer, drawn more by instinct than decision. The closer she got, the more the crack seemed to expand, not physically, but perceptually. Like the wall was thinner than it should have been. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and touched the edge. It was warm. The wallpaper peeled away beneath her fingertips, curling like dry skin. The crack widened, not a tear, but an opening, leading inward into a narrow space behind the walls. Dust swirled around her, illuminated by that strange golden glow. There were no obvious light sources, just a soft radiance coming from deeper inside. The voice didn't call again, but something waited. Crouching, Ellie squeezed through the gap, heart hammering. The space was tight, pressing against her shoulders and hips. Cobwebs clung to her skin. The air smelled old, like stone cellars and forgotten paper. The passage turned. Once. Twice. Then opened suddenly into a hidden room no larger than a closet. Shelves lined the walls, filled with faded trinkets, childhood toys, brittle books, and dozens of keys, each one hanging from a nail. And at the center of the floor, inlaid into the old wood, was a small trapdoor. Her breath caught. There was no way this had been part of the house. The cottage wasn't big enough, deep enough. Yet here it was, pulsing with that same soft light through the seams. She reached for the trapdoor, hesitating. Beneath her palm, the wood felt warm again. And something moved just underneath. Not crawling, instead it felt like breathing. Something waiting for her to open it, like a box that had never been meant to stay sealed. She should have left. She should have turned back. But Ellie opened it. Slowly. The light spilled out in full then, golden and flickering. But instead of a staircase or a ladder, there was only a mirror set into the floor. Old, clouded glass framed in blackened brass. Her reflection stared back. But it wasn't copying her. It blinked, just a second too late. And it was smiling. Ellie scrambled backward, her shoulder striking one of the dusty shelves, knocking a dozen keys to the floor with a chime of delicate metal. The mirror didn't shatter, but the reflection remained, watching her, still smiling, like it had been waiting for the moment she'd finally look. She stared at it. Her own face, but subtly wrong. The skin was too pale, the eyes slightly darker, too focused. The smile curled upward not in joy, but in knowledge. It was a version of her that had been here longer, that belonged to this hidden space. And it wasn't trapped, it was inviting. The glass began to ripple, like water disturbed by breath. The image distorted, and for a second, Ellie saw the mirror version lift its hand, palm forward, and press it against the inside of the glass. She felt warmth on her cheek. She flinched and looked around. Nothing. Just the still, stale air of the room. But when she looked back, the mirrored Ellie was no longer mimicking her movements. It was still standing there, calm and poised. Its hand still rested on the other side of the glass, but its eyes had shifted, staring just over Ellie's shoulder. Something was behind her. She turned slowly, her skin crawling. The narrow passage behind her was still empty. Silent. But it no longer felt alone. The air was heavier now. Charged. And she could swear, that she heard a heartbeat. Not hers. Not fast or panicked. Steady. Patient. Then came the whisper again. Not from the mirror, but from behind the walls. She let it in. The words were barely audible, spoken in a dry, almost reverent tone, as if the house itself was remembering. Ellie spun back to the mirror. Her reflection was gone. The surface now showed only darkness, endless and slow, like deep water. But something within that blackness was rising. A shape. Pale and long. A hand. It pressed against the other side of the mirror, followed by another. Then a face began to emerge, eyes closed as though sleeping. Or remembering how to wake. Ellie backed away, her breath shallow, throat tight. She bumped into the shelves again, keys clattering across the wood like insects. The trapdoor slammed shut. The golden light snuffed out. The mirror vanished into blackness. Only silence remained, complete and unnatural. Ellie crawled back through the narrow corridor, gasping, desperate to return to the ordinary world of creaking floors and cold sheets. But even as she escaped, she felt it. Something had seen her. And now, it knew her name. She didn't sleep that night. Wrapped in blankets, knees drawn to her chest, Ellie sat on the bed as dawn bled gray across the windowpane. The warmth of the morning couldn't quite chase away the chill lodged in her skin. Every creak of the house made her flinch. The mirror behind the trapdoor was gone, but the memory of that reflection, watching her, knowing her, wouldn't fade. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe she'd fallen asleep at some point, dreaming with her eyes open. But when she looked at her arms and hands, she saw the faint scratches from the shelves, a cobweb still caught in her hair, and the rusty scent of old metal from where one of the keys had cut her thumb. It had happened. All of it. She considered leaving. Just packing a bag and walking until the road turned unfamiliar again. But something told her it wouldn't matter. Whatever had stirred down there wasn't bound to the cottage, it had followed her out. All day, she avoided the parlor. She moved from room to room like a visitor in her own skin. But as dusk crept in, the house shifted. Shadows thickened, and the air turned still, expectant. At exactly 3 again, the wind began. It started softly, that same sighing through wood, familiar now. But tonight, it didn't stop there. Tonight, it moved. From the parlor. Into the hall. Up the stairs. She heard the floor groan beneath weight that wasn't hers. She held her breath, listening to slow, deliberate steps approaching her room. Then, nothing. A long silence. She eased toward the door, each footstep silent on the old rug. She pressed her ear to the wood. On the other side, a whisper, so close it brushed her skin. "Let me in." She stumbled back. The doorknob turned. Just a fraction. She ran to her dresser, shoved it against the door with shaking arms, heart slamming against her ribs. The knob stopped. No other sounds followed. Only silence and the faintest whiff of dust and candle smoke in the air. Ellie didn't sleep again. But something did. She could feel it resting, just on the other side of the door, breathing shallowly. Waiting for her to tire. And behind her own reflection in the mirror above the bureau, she thought she saw the faintest shimmer of golden light, flickering, like a dream that remembered it had once been real. The next morning arrived colorless and cold. Ellie moved through the house with the caution of someone walking through a minefield, careful not to look in mirrors too long, not to listen too closely when the house creaked, not to call attention to herself. The key she'd picked up from the shelf still lay on her bedside table, rusted and thin, too small for any door she could find. But she hadn't dared to throw it away. Somehow, it felt wrong to try. She avoided the parlor entirely now. Something about that room had changed. It wasn't just the trapdoor, closed and hidden beneath the floorboards once again, but the very air felt altered. It was thicker, like the room was holding its breath. That evening, a storm rolled in. Lightning flickered through the windows, and the wind howled louder than before, screaming around the eaves. Thunder cracked the sky wide open. The power went out. Ellie lit candles one by one, their flickering light barely reaching the corners of the room. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, moving just slightly when she wasn't looking. At 3 a.m., the wind stopped. Dead silence. And then, from downstairs, the creak of the parlor door opening. She held her breath, heart hammering in her throat. Something was moving again, slow, deliberate footsteps crossing the creaking floor. They stopped at the base of the stairs. She gripped the flashlight in her drawer and flicked it on, only for it to sputter and die. The batteries, brand new that morning, had drained completely. She sat in the dark, trembling. Then the steps continued, ascending, unhurried. Closer. Each stair groaned under invisible weight. Closer. Ellie bolted from her room, racing toward the attic. The stairs groaned under her weight too, but she didn't stop. She slammed the attic door shut behind her and locked it, backing into the dusty dark. From beneath the door, golden light glowed faintly. Not candlelight. Something brighter. Something that pulsed. A whisper rose from the shadows. "You opened the mirror. Now we're awake." Ellie turned. At the far end of the attic, where an old vanity mirror leaned against the wall, her reflection was already standing. It didn't mimic her. It just waited, head tilted, smiling softly. And behind her reflection, something else moved. Ellie pressed herself against the attic wall, chest rising and falling in shallow gasps. The reflection in the vanity watched her with quiet patience, the same gentle tilt of the head, the same soft smile. But what shifted behind it was harder to make sense of: dark, slow-moving forms like hands dragging across water, just out of focus. She looked around for something, anything, to block the mirror, to break it, to push it away. But her limbs felt heavy, like the air had thickened, pressing her down into the wood of the attic floor. Dust hovered unnaturally in the candlelight, suspended like ash. From behind the mirror, a sound emerged. Not a whisper. Breathing. Steady. Measured. Familiar. Her own. The reflection took a step forward, though the glass did not shatter or crack. It was as if the surface yielded, as if it had always been more of a curtain than a barrier. Ellie staggered back, bumping into an old trunk that rocked and groaned beneath her weight. The breath behind the mirror grew louder, syncing with her own. And then the reflection spoke. "I've been here longer than you." Its voice was her voice, yet not. Warmer, darker. Like something had grown in her chest while she slept and had now learned how to speak. "You left the door open." Ellie shook her head, whispering, "I closed it. I closed it." "But you saw me," the voice murmured, stepping halfway through the mirror. One foot hovered just beyond the surface, casting no shadow. "And once you see the other side, it begins to remember you." The attic grew colder. The candle flame flickered violently, then went out. Darkness swallowed everything, except the soft gold of the mirror light. Behind her, the floor creaked. Not under her weight. Another step. Then another. She turned slowly. Nothing there. But she knew. It was circling her now. Both inside the mirror and behind her. There was no safe direction, no way to close her eyes without wondering which version of herself would wake up. Then she felt it, fingers brushing the back of her neck. Not forceful. Just familiar. "I'm tired," she whispered. "So rest," the reflection said. "I'll keep watch." The attic door creaked, just slightly. And then the breathing in the room stopped. Ellie didn't remember lying down. But when her eyes opened, the attic was dim with morning. Light slanted through the cracked window, casting sharp lines across the floorboards. Dust floated peacefully. The mirror was still there, but it was just glass again, still, cold, dull. She sat up slowly. Every muscle ached. Her mouth was dry, and her fingers felt numb, like she'd been holding something too tightly in her sleep. But there was nothing in her hands. Only the faintest warmth lingered in the air, as if someone had been standing over her a moment before. Downstairs, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Even the usual creaks and groans of settling would seem to be holding their breath. Ellie walked through it carefully, touching the walls as if to confirm they were real. Her reflection greeted her in the hallway mirror, but it moved with her again, no longer a second presence, just her own face, pale and hollow-eyed. In the parlor, the trapdoor was gone. No lines, no hinges, no sign it had ever existed. The floorboards were seamless. She knelt and ran her hands along the space where she knew it had been, but it was solid, smooth. Not even dust disturbed the surface. As if the house had decided it was time to forget. But Ellie couldn't. All day, she waited for the mirror to flicker, for the key to rattle, for the stairs to creak again. But nothing came. When night fell, she lit her candles early, sitting cross-legged on her bed, facing the door. Watching. Listening. 3 o'clock came. The wind outside whispered low through the trees. The cottage remained silent. No footsteps. No voices. Just the sound of her own breathing, steady and alone. For the first time in nights, Ellie slept. But she dreamed. She stood in a hallway lined with mirrors, each one reflecting her, but not exactly. Some wore different expressions. Some blinked when she didn't. One stood with her back turned, unmoving. At the end of the corridor stood a door. A golden light pulsed beneath it, slow and steady. As she approached, all the mirrors turned toward her. And every reflection smiled. Ellie woke with a start, her breath catching in her throat. Her bedroom was drenched in moonlight, pale and cold. The window had frosted at the edges, though it was midsummer. Her skin prickled with the memory of that dream, the endless hallway, the mirrors, and that pulsing gold light. She touched her wrist. It was warm, faintly tingling, like something had gripped it while she slept. She glanced at the vanity mirror in the corner. Just her reflection. Still, she rose and approached it. Her breath fogged the surface slightly as she leaned in. Her reflection mimicked her, slow and hesitant. But something in its eyes, her eyes, wasn't quite right. They didn't flicker with candlelight. They were still. Waiting. Then the gold light shimmered behind the glass. Just once. Ellie stumbled back, heart thudding. She rushed to cover the mirror with a blanket, throwing it over the glass like a shroud. The cloth settled, still and quiet. The house was silent. Too silent. She moved through the cottage again, every board groaning beneath her steps. Downstairs, in the kitchen, the light above the stove flickered. Once. Then twice. Then steadied. She opened the pantry to fetch a glass, and paused. The key. The same rusted, delicate key she'd left upstairs. It sat on the middle shelf, nestled between a jar of honey and a tin of tea leaves. She hadn't brought it here. She hadn't touched it since that first night. Hands trembling, she reached for it, and a whisper floated behind her ear. Not yet. She turned. No one. But the air smelled strange now, sweet, like flowers just before they rot. And the kitchen mirror, the one above the sink, was uncovered. She hadn't touched it. Hadn't even looked at it in days. In the reflection, the pantry door behind her was wide open. In reality, it was shut. And Ellie, staring at that glass, realized she could see her reflection clearly. But her reflection wasn't looking at her. It was looking past her. Smiling. And lifting its hand. As if to knock. Ellie's breath caught in her throat as the reflection's hand pressed softly against the glass. A slow, deliberate knock echoed in the silence, a sound that seemed to ripple outward, vibrating through the very air of the kitchen. She stood frozen, eyes locked with the mirror's unsettling smile, a smile that was both hers and not hers, warm yet empty. The pantry door behind her, still closed in reality, creaked open an inch, as if responding to that invisible knock. A cold draft brushed her neck, raising goosebumps that spread like a quiet warning. She wanted to run, to flee the house, the mirrors, the impossible reflections. But her feet felt rooted, heavy like the wood beneath her, as if the house itself was holding her in place. Then the glass began to ripple, as if it were water disturbed by a stone. The reflection's hand pushed further, the outline of fingers blurring and stretching. Ellie's heart hammered, too loud, too fast. As the surface between worlds thinned, glowing softly with that familiar golden light. Her reflection smiled wider now, eyes gleaming with something ancient and knowing. It whispered, voice like silk over stone, "We've been waiting for you." A sudden shiver ran through Ellie, a sensation like falling and floating all at once. The kitchen dissolved around her, the walls melting into shadows and whispers. The pantry door swung open fully, revealing not shelves or food, but a dark passage lined with flickering mirrors stretching into infinity. Without thinking, she stepped forward. The last thing Ellie saw was her reflection stepping out of the glass, no longer a mirror image but a separate being, calm and patient, waiting to take her place. Between the worlds, the air was still and quiet. The house held its breath. Outside, the night pressed close, soft and endless. And somewhere deep within, a single key turned, locking a door that was never meant to open again.